So today we're going to be doing some exercises that are play oriented. So I need you in number two. I need you to let go of the results. And the more you're willing to play and the more you're willing to be like engaged, because we might do, one breakout, the more you're willing to share, the more other people are going to get out of it and the more you're going to get out of it. Cool. So if that's cool, give me a thumbs up or an emoji about a thumbs up, and then let's get started here. So let me get my screen ready. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Can everyone see my screen? Give me a thumbs up if you can. And then Melissa and Jim, if you just want to let Coral in. Okay. All right. So we are talking about making work suck less, healing workplaces through play. Now, let me just brace y'all. The beginning of it is going to be a little angry. I'm going to get a little angry. All right. And then we're going to get a little playful, but it goes hand in hand because we got to talk about how work has sucked for a while. Okay. So the last time I was here, I was hanging out with Jim and we were just talking about rediscovering your flow through play. And now I'm realizing that a lot of people are going through a lot of pain because work kind of sucks. So we've done the drawing exercise, but the third reason why I had you do this drawing exercise, and this ties directly with like addressing how to make work suck less, is something known as attunement. So attunement's actually one of the first ways you ever play as a kid, as first ways you ever play as a baby. So when you were picked up as a child, whether by a parent or guardian, when you locked eyes with that person, it's one of the few times in your whole life where your brain waves are identical and you feel seen and heard and appreciated and loved and valued. You feel all these things without anyone saying any words. And then you seek that level of attunement for the rest of your life, right? In your relationships, in your friendships, at work. There's even attunement, I'm sure you understand, as change management professionals, where you have to like take this group. Now they've gone through some trauma or something new. And then how do we get them back on the same page, right? And I'm going to be referencing a lot of Ted Lasso because I just love that show. And also I made a whole podcast about it a while back. But like this ability to actually, if you ever watch the show, there's constant ways in which he's playing and joking around to look for attunement. And you can feel it because you'll feel it when you're in like a really good meeting. You feel it when you've gotten through like a hard situation, when you're changing over the organization or merging the organization. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, it feels like you're all on the same page. So that's what we're constantly trying to be looking for. How do we get people attuned? And that's what we're going to kind of try to answer today. So covering what we're doing, we're going to first build the work playground. We have to build it. Before we can play in it, we must build it. So what we're going to cover is, why does work suck now? Because it kind of does for a lot of people. Maybe not for you, but for some. Then we're going to talk about what initial steps we need to build back trust. Sorry, I might be coughing a little bit during this. How can we measure progress in healing a workplace? And then finally, what are you willing to do first? Like, I'm not doing this so I can just like talk and then y'all can like take some notes and then we never do anything about it. Like, I only want to do this if we're actually going to try this stuff out. So I encourage you, try out whatever exercises I give you. If they suck, let me know. I'm all about it. Like, I don't care. Like, I want progress, right? And the whole thing about play, it's a lot of experimentation. It's a lot of failure. But this is how this change management, man. It's just like we're just trying to figure it out as we go along and just adapting. So everything that you see here, if it resonates, steal it. If you don't like it, just ignore it. Awesome? Great. Okay, so let's first talk about who in the world is this random dude, okay? This is me, obviously, on the left, pre-pandemic, and this is me post-pandemic. As you can see, it's been tough. It's been, like lost the hair, aged a little bit. Like this was 2019, people. Like, right? Like it's been rough. But did any of you see the movie Big with Tom Hanks? Like, just give me a thumbs up if you saw the movie Big with Tom Hanks. Wasn't that so good? It was such a good movie. And the reason why I loved it so much is because he got to play with toys for a living. So when I saw that movie, I saw it in third grade, and then I went to FEO Schwartz. I started dancing on a piano, and no one hired me, so I was very disappointed. And then I went back home and I wrote on my word processor and I started writing toy companies until I got hired like 15 years later. And I don't know if you've ever gotten exactly what you've always wanted and then been so disappointed when you got there, right? But like no toys, no fun, no high fives, no play, right? It was so disappointing, right? And then I left New York. That's where I was at the time. I came to the San Francisco Bay Area, Norcal, represent. This is my Golden State Warrior bow tie. And I bumped into an organization on Craigslist. And y'all know how shady Craigslist is, right? Like maybe furniture, but nothing else. No, you don't want anything. But I found a job on Craigslist teaching kids engineering with Lego. It's still around today. And it was 7 people, 7 nerds. And I was getting paid $150 a week. But we got to play for a living. And we took it from 7 people to 400 people. It became the largest Lego-inspired STEM organization in the US. And we did it all by play. Like we had no idea what we were doing. No business plan. We picked people we thought were fun. We prioritized people. We followed our curiosity, but we were all about the play because like we weren't paying people enough. They were like part-time staff, but some part-time staff stayed like 3-4 years. And we were to the point that we're like, maybe you should leave. Like you probably should get another job. Like, dude, but because of the play, people felt seen, heard, appreciated, and valued, right? Attunement. So that's what we really have to be thinking about, especially with you constantly helping people through change. How do we keep that level of attunement? So that's what we're exploring. So let me first define what I mean by play. Play is any joyful act where you forget about time and no specific purpose or result. You're fully immersed in the moment, but it's also what I said earlier. Play is the opposite of perfection. Perfection rooted in ego, shame, constantly trying to be right. Play is rooted in curiosity, experimentation, a sense of wonder. And that's where we want to be. That actually helps people get through change because they're like, we're just figuring this out as we go along. We're kind of just making this up, right? Then people are much more open. But when you're focused on perfection, it's like, it's going to go this way. And then it doesn't. Everyone gets really angry. So I talk about how Stephen Johnson says you'll find the future where people are having the most fun. So if you look at organizations that are attracting the most people, they are tackling some of the most innovative and creative ideas. If you looked at like TikTok during the pandemic, so many people were running to TikTok, so many Gen Z people, right? And because of that, so many other people wanted to join. And if you think that for organizations, whichever organizations in an industry are taking risks and having fun doing it, people want to be part of those organizations. A great example of this way back in the day was Google. I don't know, sometime now it's controversial. But Google at the time, when they first started, had something called the 20% rule, where they would give their staff a fifth of their time to do whatever they wanted, as long as it helped Google. And what came from that 20% rule? Google AdSense, Gmail, Google News, Google Maps, the foundations of Google came from play. Like when people are like, why do I need to play? Money. If you let people actually play, you probably make more money because you'd have innovative people constantly trying to get there. Another great example of this, how many of you are familiar with the Wright brothers? Raise your hand if you're familiar with Wright brothers, everyone there. How many of you know Samuel Pierpont Langley? Anyone about Pierpont? Oh, there we go. Look at that. Melissa's got it. Okay. So not a lot of people know about Pierpont. So Samuel Pierpont Langley competed against the Wright brothers, except for Pierpont had $2.5 million by the War Department. He had access to the top scientists and engineers at the Smithsonian. Why did the Wright brothers beat this dude that had so much more money? The reason is because perfection versus play. So many of these scientists were trying to compete, ego, who's gonna take credit for this? And because of that, when they flew their plane and it failed after 2 attempts, people just started quitting. Meanwhile, the Wright brothers, remember, bike mechanics with no engineering background, were just messing around, but they were fascinated with the idea. So they failed so many times to the point that, in Ohio, they were getting mocked. But because they kept seeing them crash over and over again, after a while, people started feeling bad for them, and they actually started bringing them food and resources, and they were just trying to help them out, right? So this is like an example of when you're willing to play and people see you doing that and you're willing to experiment and fail through the process, there's a certain level of connection and attunement that actually comes to buy, because you're like, wow, those people are really having fun. A great example of this is at a restaurant when, let's say you're sitting at a restaurant and you're with like people that you don't like and everyone's just all bored, and then you hear laughter at another table and then you get all angry and you're like, why are they having so much fun while I'm sitting here? It's because you want to be near the fun. You don't want to be at the boring table. You want to be like able to connect with people. So how are we making sure that we create, as we're changing over, that we're keeping a certain level of creativity and innovation available as we're changing over, so that people feel seen and recognized, that they have this playground they can play with? Because right now, as some of you might recognize from Office Space, I travel all over the country, sometimes Canada. Employees freaking hate work right now. Like, it is a vibe, man. And I'm talking about every generation. Every generation has some issue right now. And it's not like work sucks. Yeah, work has always sucked. It seems like it sucks more since the pandemic. I don't know why, but people are just angry and frustrated. And the more I spoke to people, I kind of found out the reason why. And this is the vegetable portion. So I'm just going to give you a trigger warning. This is a sad part. But I was asking people, okay, why do you feel as if work sucks? And part of the reason is, first, employees feel used. So remember how I talked about Google 20% rule? Well, recently, some Google employees didn't realize they were laid off until their badges wouldn't let them into the office. There was a guy that had worked for Google for 15 years. 15 years. He goes in at 4 a.m. to get a project done early, and his fob doesn't work. That's how he found out he got laid off. No opportunity to say goodbye to any of his staff or any of his colleagues. No goodbye party. Couldn't even access his email. That's how he found out. The same company that used to be all about play and don't be evil, all of a sudden, I don't know what happened, but this happened, right? That's one thing. So employees feel used. Also, employees feel disrespected. Sephora hit $10 billion in revenue, and then workers aren't happy that all they got was a stale cookie. So Sephora employees all received cookies that said, we hit $10 billion. No bonus, no recognition, a cookie. And the cookies were old. So they dropped between $300,000 and $500,000 on cookies. Just give them the money, right? What are we doing? So employees feel super disrespected. And then finally, and this one I got from John Oliver, And I'm going to be doing this at Work Human, but I'm not going to say the names of these companies. So this might be the only one. So I don't know if y'all have ever been to a dollar store, but the dollar stores are now cutting down on employees. So sometimes one employee runs the store, or only two, when it should be like four. This one person posted on TikTok, a manager, that because there's so few employees, a lot of these dollar stores are getting robbed. So this one store gets robbed. This manager's telling this on TikTok. She gets robbed. She and other person is put in the back via gunpoint. Person takes the money and leaves. She calls her district manager up and she says, hey, we just got robbed. The district manager's like, oh no, are you okay? She's like, yeah. And then the next question her district manager said was, so who's covering tomorrow? I just need to know who is going to be covering the shift. This is 10 minutes after she thought she was going to lose her life. Quit like the next day. So like the fact that these are obviously extreme stories, but the fact that these are popping up is showing the level of disconnect between employer leaders and employees. And especially y'all as change management people, you're stuck right in the middle of this, right? Having to like merge this together, or how to like apologize for these employers when like a lot of their attitudes has just been kind of crappy, like lacking empathy, lacking sympathy, lacking compassion. Like, where's the humanity? And this is where we need to push back first before we can play, right? We need to create a safe playground in order to play. And then the other thing that I tell a lot of people is, people are constantly trying to tell you that you're productive, that you need to be more productive every year. Got to be more productive. Hey, 10% more productive, 5% more productive. Okay, keep going. You're great, right? But we need to be more productive every year. We, since 1960, maybe even 1979, we are 64% more productive. We can't be any more productive than we have been, but we are not getting paid. Our pay is only increased by 14.8%. So because of this, people feel slighted, man. We can't be any more efficient or adaptable, And I know, again, y'all are in the middle of this trying to like heal these workplaces and being like, don't worry, once the change happens, everything's going to work out and we'll be back to normal. But people feel really spent and they don't feel that they're being recognized. So how do we address this, right? So this is why work has sucked for a lot of people. And this is why it's like, okay, so you're at work 2,000 to 2,500 hours. If that's going to be the case, work shouldn't have to suck all the time. It really shouldn't. So how are we bringing some play, some ease to this workplace so that people feel seen, heard, appreciated, and valued? Okay? So these are the questions. I'm going to be posing questions worth asking, right? So when I first talk to employees, I'm like, okay, what do you want? Out of everything, what do you want? And they go, I want to feel seen, I want to feel appreciated, and I want to feel heard. What in the world does that even mean, right? So feeling seen, do you see me as a human being, not just a cog in the machine? Appreciated, are you paying me? Like, are you compensating me for what I deserve, right? And then heard, are my issues being addressed? If we are changing over, right, the issues that I dealt with in the last organization or the last interpretation of this company, have they now been addressed? So do we have to deal with that anymore? Or are we still dealing with the same annoying inefficiencies? Have my issues fallen into a black hole, or is action being taken? So one of the first questions you should be asking employees or talking to leadership to get them to ask their employees as you're dealing with this change is, what do you need to feel seen, heard, and appreciated? What does your staff need to feel seen, heard, and appreciated, right? And then same aspect of that question would be, when have you not? What do you need to feel seen, heard, and appreciated? What does your staff need to feel seen, heard, and appreciated? And then even ask, when has that not happened? So that you can make sure the leaders are not doing this going forward. That's the first question worth asking. Now, I want to play. I think we should play. But there's glass on the playground. We must remove the glass so we can play. So how do we do that? We have to answer some hard questions first, and then we can get to actual play and more connection. So are you ready for hard questions? Give me a thumbs up if you're ready for the hard. All right, here we go. So questions worth asking. What values are communicated, let's say not the team, through the organization's actions? Are we Sephora with the $10 billion cookies as we're changing over? Are we like Spanx? The Spanx CEO surprised every employee with 2 first-class tickets and 10 grand when they went public. Now, you might not be able to do that, but what actions are you doing to communicate that you really care about your staff, right? Be asking the leaders, what are you doing, right? What are the actions that currently are communicated, through your values, and what do you want them to be? So that's really important to ask. Then this has got to be addressed. So work culture is defined by the worst behavior tolerated, right? If you want to change anything about your organization, just address that. Worst behavior tolerated, let's take care of that. Everything changes. So a lot of times when people say, the leaders, because I'm sure you talk to some leaders, and they're like, nobody wants to work anymore. And it's like, nah, dude, it's nobody wants to work with you. Like nobody wants to work with that vibe, that person. So we need to be asking ourselves a really hard question, which is, as we're changing over, which managers should not be leading people? Which managers should have never been leaders in the first place? Great individual contributors, right? But they got promoted and now they happen to be in this job, but they shouldn't be leaders. And I think we don't address this enough. And then if you're like, oh, well, I think that's just me. Actually, according to studies, this is happening all over the country. 82% of managers are considered accidental bosses, which means they needed to move somebody up. They just threw that person up there. And that's why 1 in 3 people are quitting, because they are not trained. And when you ask these managers or bosses or leaders, what do you hate most? They're like, training. I don't like to be trained. So like this has to be addressed. So again, values, what values are communicated through your organization's and team's action, your leaders' actions, and which managers should not be leading people. If you can address either of those as it's changing over, oh my gosh, that sends such a message to all staff of like, oh, we're really getting better. Like we really care. I let go of someone toxic at my last job. It caused 4 bad people to quit. 4 people that had horrible attitudes that should have quit a long time ago. Once that first person went, everyone else was like, oh, I realized I can't do that action anymore here. So be thinking about that. All right, last thing before we get to some play. We're all feeling burnt out, right? Like some people feel like they're doing jobs of 2 or 3 people, impossible deadlines, consistently working late, all that stuff, overly demanding supervisors. I also looked up specifically challenges for y'all, right, as change management professionals. And what I heard was like staff resistant to change, right? Lack of leadership support. Like, yeah, we're totally about it. And then not supporting you. Culture clash, right? Like, I liked how we did it the old way, right? Or communication breakdowns. Well, this person didn't tell me this is how we have to do it now, right? So y'all have been dealing with that in addition to working with staff that feel burnt out, impossible deadlines, all this stuff. So a problem that really frustrates a lot of employees as change is happening is you're feeling all of this pressure, and then leaders have the audacity to be like, you know what you should do to address this? Little yoga, man. Maybe a little burnout, maybe a little happy hour. Have you tried? Let's have another pizza party. Have you considered therapy? They are trying to address systemic issues with individual problems. So we need to be asking leaders, what are you doing about systemic issues? If my staff is burning out and we're now changing over to something new, are they still going to be dealing with burnout because they have way too much work on their plate? Are they still doing the job of 2 to 3 people? Because if they are, what's the point? They're going to leave then because they're just not going to vibe with this after a certain period of time. And I don't know if you met Gen Z, they don't give an F about a lot. They will bounce so quickly on you. Not because they're not like loyal. It's just because they're like, you're disrespectful. I see my parents and they're not happy in their jobs. I'm not going to do the same thing. I'll just figure it out. I'll make some videos on TikTok. I'll find a way to make money. I don't need to work here. So we really have to be asking that question. Are you addressing, or your leaders addressing, systemic issues with individual solutions? We need to stop doing that. All right. So if we've addressed all those hard questions, now we can play a little bit. So, Melissa, in a moment, we're going to break people out. And we're going to break you out into groups of 3. So I'm going to ask you these questions, right? So we want to make sure staff feels seen. But the last question is the question that I want you to talk about with people. But right now, go ahead and just write these answers down. So in order to make sure that people feel seen, we have to be recognizing and celebrating what impact they've actually had. So one of the first things I love to actually have people do is I have people be like, okay, what's your impact? So I want you to write down, what do you do best at work? What are you so amazing at? This is also really important to do in preparation for performance evaluations when you need to brag for that raise, right? So write down, what do you do best at work? What is the best thing you do at work? Why are you so awesome? And don't hold back. It's got to be, give me multiple things, all the things. And if you find this difficult, that's a good thing, because then you're like, all right, I need to be bragging about myself more, not less. All right. So write down, what do you do best at work? I'll give you about 5 more seconds for that. Okay. All right. Now let's get a little bit deeper, because that's usually, if I was doing this in person, we'd all run around and high five each other. That's what we do. We'd be like, oh my gosh, you're amazing. Oh, is that what you do best at work? Oh yeah. We just do that because frankly, we don't celebrate enough. Like, you want to address burnout right there. When are you celebrating? Why are you not celebrating more? And I'm not talking about happy hour when you're done with a project, right? I'm talking about, how are you recognizing even the smallest wins? I used to do campaign work, and when we would get a yes on a call, they'd ring this ridiculous bell. I loved that bell. It was such a dumb bell, but I loved it because it was a way in which to recognize progress. So how are you celebrating? That's a very important question to ask. That's a very important question to ask the leaders of staff. All right, second question. Let's get a little deeper. How many people's lives have you impacted, let's say last year, in a positive way, right? So you, as change management professionals, sometimes you're like merging organizations together. Sometimes you're changing an organization. So you're impacting everybody in that organization. So I want you to either answer it 2 ways. How many people's lives, like number of people, right? And then also, if you can think about it in a different way, what are the names of certain people? Are there certain people you mentored, certain people that you impacted, certain people that you saved their job? Write down either numbers or names or both. And this, again, is a great exercise to do with leaders, to do with their staff. How many people's lives have you impacted in a positive way? Let's say last year, because we're only into March of this year, almost April. Directly as well as indirectly. when I and as you're writing this down, I'm going to keep going. So when I work with HR people, it's just like you might have hired someone who's their first family member ever graduate from college. So then all of a sudden, I remember someone was sharing a story. It was like, yeah, I hired this person. They were the first person to graduate from college. Because of that, they believed then they could get a master's. Because of that, then they believed they could get a PhD. And now like they're a professor somewhere. And now everyone in that family believes now they could be there, right? That happened because that person made that decision. And a lot of times we don't give ourselves credit for that. So for you, how many people's lives have you impacted in a positive way last year? Okay. So that's second level. All right. And then now the third level, this is the one that you're going to do in the breakouts. So what I want you to do, and let's answer this from last year because let's just 2023. I want you to write down what was the most memorable and meaningful moment last year where you impacted someone in a positive way. The most memorable and meaningful moment last year where you impacted someone or a group of people because y'all worked with a lot of teams and organizations in a positive way. So I want you to jot that down. And I'll give you about 30 seconds to a minute to do that. And then after that, Melissa, if you could have them then break out into groups. And the way in which we're going to do this, it's going to be in groups of 3. Let's say the person with the longest hair goes first. And then if that person can then help the other people make sure they get time. And we'll go for about 5 minutes. We'll make it 5 minutes.
All right, I have the groups ready. Tell me when to send them.
All right. And I think you can send them now. So we'll see you back here in 5 minutes. See you soon. Have fun. Where are they going? They're going. They're moving. Here, let me stop. Should we pause the recording?
Yes.
Okay. Pause it. Okay, so both of you, what is a memorable or meaningful moment from last year where you impacted either someone in a positive way, a team in a positive way, or an organization in a positive way?
Well, Melissa's hair is much longer than mine, so she gets to go.
This is so not fair.
There we go.
I was.
How can you tell? I have it tied back.
Yeah.
I think
Well done, Obi-Wan.
Mine is a somewhat recent one. So I'm a consultant, and so I actually don't really work on teams that much. As from my company, I'm with someone else bringing a team to another site. I'm normally in bed with other folks' teams, and so I've gotten quite good at being that independent person that is able to take care of my own work, but help guide other people's works that are outside of my organization.
Yeah.
End of last year was the first time I had someone from my company with me on an engagement. And she really was like, please take the reins. I feel like I haven't had a lot of investment in my development. I just kind of bounce from manager to manager and no one really knows what I do. And like, it's been frustrating. And so I leaned in quite hard to help mentor her and give her space and advocate and make sure that she's being seen across our organization internally. So it was a good growth moment for me. But what made it a really amazing moment was that she then sent me this really long email afterwards about how she's like, working with you in those last 3 months is the most I've ever grown in my career. That was the fastest I've ever done. Like, I can't even thank you enough for how meaningful this was for me. And I just obviously wanted to cry because I'm like, that is like the best you could possibly get. And especially when I didn't feel like I was doing anything special. And then for her just to say, you really made me feel seen and like I had space and I got new skills. So that was the one, like, professionally, that I still think about every time that I'm like, I'm bad at my job. Like, I just go back and reread that email.
Yeah, go back to that email. I have like a folder of those. I love that. Yes. Yeah. Yes. All right, Jim Obi-Wan.
Okay, so I am working on a system implementation, and I'm working with a team that hasn't done a lot of projects. And so
Mm.
they got into a tangle with their implementation vendor, and the implementation vendor was basically trying to railroad them
Oh,
and
wow.
you know producing low quality deliverables, and so I worked with that team a lot, and I saw a lot of growth there in helping them understand where they should be in this process
Yeah.
and helping them find their own voice to say, hey, this isn't okay. You are
Yeah.
not meeting our needs. And so being able to, and it was great because I got to take a lot, like it was a little bit of change management. It was understanding the project management process and
Yeah.
how things should happen. And when I saw things that were happening in a way that wasn't the norm, I was able to help them recognize that and see it. And um, it's completely changed the way that they're approaching the next phase of the project, which is with the same group. And
Yeah.
so I saw just a complete tone shift with them in that they felt like they could say, hey, let's take a step back. We're not getting what we need. And, it's so easy for a system vendor to come in and say, hey, this is the way it is. Because, our program people don't know. They don't know any better. And they don't,
Yeah.
they're not used to really big projects. And so that was really a point that I felt a lot of pride about, is that they took it and they ran with it, and they didn't just keep letting things go. So
They're lucky
Wow.
to have you, Jim. Heck yeah, you gave them a voice.
Yeah, Jim.
I
Okay,
feel that.
I'll quickly share before we bring them back.
Yeah.
I was working with an organization where it was like a whole wing, like a whole department left. They all
Mm.
they almost like they became an other organization.
Mm.
And just like people felt such loss. And it's not like I did that much, but I was like brought in to like kind of like, oh, we're going through this stuff. It's kind of tough. We feel really sad. And I was like, why don't you just let them be sad? Like let us, instead of like rushing and being like, everything's great, everybody. It was just like, dude, let's mourn the fact that you just relationships that you've had for maybe even a decade or more is gone. And actually letting them vent and validate and get that out actually then help them be able to then move on. So I loved that part, because then people were like, thank you, because I just wanted to be human. So all right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Come on back. Okay. Welcome back. Welcome back. Hi, Rebecca, Tatiana, Michaela, Noel's back, Carrie, Wilhelm. All right. So I know some people are still in their groups. Okay, so while some people are coming back, I'm gonna tell. So did anyone hear a story that they were like, "Ooh, that was so good," and I really hope that person shares, or I may share for them? Karen, let's go, Karen. Love the background, by the way.
But I put a picture. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is the first time on this group. You guys are my peeps. This is great. I'm down in LA. I love it. And before I start, Jeff, had you heard of the Humor Project in New York?
Oh yeah.
Because a lot of what you're saying really dovetails.
Yeah.
We could talk offline about it. It was awesome. But I'm gonna I liked Coral said about how she coached a person that didn't really have confidence, and she really helped that person to develop confidence in her coaching. And then he or she they got a promotion, and then from director and then on to VP. So just to see, I think that long-term success and the selflessness and like, I want you to succeed. And and we all of the 5 were good examples, but that one really stood out.
Yes. Melissa, would you be open to sharing yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one I shared with Jeff and Jim in our room. So I'm a consultant, and how my company works, it's very typical for us not to be in team environments where you're a single consultant that you come into your client space and you embed with their team and you help their team get to their solution and their goal. So for the last almost year and a half, 2 years, I've really been an independent contributor in that particular way, coaching client organizations through. And at the end of last year, I had a colleague from my company come with me on an engagement. So I was kind of her senior, and she shared with me, I'm really looking forward to this, but more importantly, like, I'm glad I'm not alone. I also really want to develop in my skills. I feel like I haven't really had anyone that can speak to what I do, and I don't feel like I've grown that much. And so our engagement was short. It was about 3 months, but I made a point to take an interest in her goals, ask about how she wants to grow, and then really tried my best to give her things that pushed her or made her excited. I advocated through any avenue I had, ensured that she got visibility and awareness across our company, because a lot of times it can be hard for people to know who you are. And so I felt pretty good about, like, okay, I'm gaining a lot of these like leadership skills, and I like that. But at the end of the engagement, she sent me a really long email of feedback about all the ways that I made her feel seen and that she grew. And she's like, I've grown the most working with you for just 3 months than I have at any other point in my career. And I am just so thankful for the interest you took in me. And from that, we ended up winning like a huge portfolio of work at that particular client. Other directors at my company know who she is, and she's like one of the most sought after consultants recently for what she does. So she went from kind of being like, I don't know who you are, to like having a lot of confidence and being a go-getter and going to get things. And I was telling Jeff and Jim, like, whenever I have one of those days where I'm like, I feel like I'm bad at my job, or like, I don't know what I'm doing, like, I'll go back and reread that email and be like, okay, no, I don't suck. Like that was one change I was able to make for a person.
So huge lesson right there, right? Every one of us needs a celebration folder of all the good feedback we've ever gotten. Go back to your old emails and put that in there when things get really tough, right? Now, here, I'll just share this one last bit. So there's a reason why we're sharing these stories, not just because like it's corny and it makes you all happy and everything like this, but it actually grounds people to the organization. It grounds people back to their teams. I was working with, I think, the city of Rancho Cucamonga. I just love saying that name, by the way. It's so fun. We were doing this exercise with city employees, and there was a GIS guy, like a maps guy. And I was like, what is your impactful moment? And he's like, dude, I'm a maps guy. Like, I don't have anything. And I was like, well, what was the last time something happened that was really unique? And he goes, well, the firefighters came recently and thanked me for something. And I was like, why? And it was like, well, one of their firefighters had actually died. He had passed away of cancer, partly because he inhaled so many fumes over the years, saving people's lives, all this stuff, right? And what the maps guy did, the GIS guy, they needed someone to come up with the funeral procession route. So he created the entire procession and did it in a way that covered a majority of the city. And it gave an excuse for the community to thank the firefighters and thank the family. This dude just makes maps, right? So this idea that the stories root us, and that when people are like going through all this change, they're like, I'm thinking about quitting, or I don't know about this, then it's just like, well, why are you here? What was the reason why you were here in the first place? What is your reason for changing now? Like, these stories actually matter, right? And then from a positive psychology standpoint, so let me share my screen again. From a positive psychology standpoint, you're actually drumming up certain chemicals. So you're drumming up dopamine, the same thing you get when you're celebrating wins. You're drumming up oxytocin, the same feeling you get when you get compliments or you're like holding a baby or playing with a pet. Serotonin, when we're writing stuff quietly, the whole meditating, that's a mood stabilizer. And then lastly, endorphins. When you're sharing stories and you're laughing about it, you're literally taking pain away. So if you can even laugh at a meeting, you take pain away in the meeting. The other way to take pain away in a meeting is to just cancel the meeting, because we really don't need this many meetings, people. Like, let's just be honest, too many meetings. All right, I don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to speed through this last part. You might be angry about this, but whatever. We're going to do it. Okay. So final things, right? So we talked about seen. The feeling heard part, especially when it comes to change, is address your water pressure issues. So what I mean by that, in Ted Lasso, my show, one of the first things players complain about was the water pressure. No one's ever addressed it. He fixed that one issue, small issue. All of a sudden, people are like, oh, things actually matter. What are these simple issues that would dramatically improve people's lives in a very small way? You do that, you build so much trust with the staff. They're like, things are actually getting done that wouldn't have gotten done before. So fix your water pressure. What are your water pressure issues? Go ahead and fix those. The feeling appreciated part, help your leaders understand what your staff's languages of appreciation are. Tangible gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, acts of service. Make sure your leaders are not giving in the way that is their language of appreciation, but their staff. Because if a staff member wants tangible gifts, meaning they want money, and the leader's like, well, I love quality time, so you get to spend more time with me. That is torture, right? That is not fun. That give me money, not me spending time with you. So what can leaders do during this transition to recognize their staff? And telling employees, tell your leaders, this is how I want to feel appreciated. This is how I want to feel recognized for my work, okay? So how would you like to receive that recognition? Very important question. And then finally, we're talking about humans wanting to be treated like humans. I'm a play guy, but I hate forced fun. So escape rooms, if you put Chad in a room with Samantha and they go into the escape room, they're going to hate each other beforehand and they're going to hate each other afterwards. So like bowling or you can do those, but forget about that. Like that is not the type of play that I'm talking about. The type of play I'm talking about is zone of genius play. I'm going to get to this. What is the work where your staff is forgetting about time? What is the work they would do even if they weren't getting paid to do that work? Help them do just a little bit more of that work. Help the leaders address this because this is what keeps staff there. Because then they feel seen, heard, and appreciated, and they get to do cool ass work, right? So that's what we're trying to get to. What is your staff's zone of genius? And heck, what is your zone of genius work? And how do you do more of that? Because what happens is when you do this work, you're 5 times more productive, 500% more productive, according to positive psychology studies. So summarizing all of it, because it was a lot. If you want to take a screenshot, I'll also send out these slides so you can have them. But these are the questions that you constantly need to be asking leaders to ask their staff. What do you do to ensure your staff feels seen, heard, and appreciated? What values are communicated through your actions? Which managers should not be leaders? Are you addressing systemic issues with individual solutions? What are your water pressure issues? How do you address them? What is your language of appreciation? What is your staff's? And finally, what is your zone of genius? What are your staff's zone of genius? And in the leader's case, what are they doing to make sure they know their staff's zone of genius? You do any of this stuff, work doesn't suck so much. And then all of a sudden, people finally are excited to come back to work again. So that is my time. Feel free to scan the QR code. Let's stay connected. Blah, blah, blah. I'm very happy to be here.
So many huge thank yous to you, Jeff, and for those of you that joined us for this conversation and play a little bit this evening. As Jeff mentioned, we are at time, so if you need a hop, go for it. But I'd also like to invite if anyone has any burning questions or not so much a question, more of a comment for Jeff. Now's your opportunity to come off mute. Go ahead and share what you're thinking.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the content that you covered and the approach that you took to cover some topics playfully, but also seriously. So thank you so much. I did have to step away for a couple minutes, so I'm excited to catch the recording, but nice job.
Thanks, Tatiana. And I love the space background, by the way. I love it. Any other comments?
Hi, Karen. Thank you so much, Jeff. I'm just about to re-enter independent consulting, but I wanted to
Woo-hoo!
shift. Woohoo, yeah. I've been primarily doing training seminars, and I want to do more of the deeper work and the OD interventions. And you've given me so much hope because this even 20 years ago, I went to Humor Project and did like similar,
Mhm.
playful activities, but I feel like maybe the cultures are more ready. But you just given me so much hope, and I'm looking forward to connect and I'm happy to give you a great review wherever you need it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. You do bring up a really interesting point, right? Is because we go in cycles, and right now there definitely is a divide between leaders or employers and employees, where the compassion and the shared humanity is kind of like disconnected.
Mhm.
And any change management professionals that can help bring humanity back, especially to the leaders, they're going to be so much more thankful because they'll be able to keep a decent amount of their staff through all this change. The ones that are just like, we're going to replace everyone with AI, dude, not enjoyable organizations to be a part of. And I get it also. I know like some jobs are just going to disappear because of AI or other things, but like there's got to be more compassion in this. And that's why I feel your role is so important, because change doesn't mean that we have to lack humanity.
Jeff, I know we cut you a little short at the end, and you had like a lot of different tactics and tools that you like to use. So I wanted to ask, do you have a go-to tactic or tool that you're like, no matter what situation I'm in, if I need to crack a sticky cultural code, like this is the one that I typically whip out first?
I don't know. I don't know. There's two that come to mind. One I kind of briefly mentioned, right? Is just like I really get a vibe of an organization based off of asking them, okay, what's the worst behavior you're currently tolerating? Oh, Chad, so your values are this. I see your values are on this board over here. There's an eagle, with leadership and all these words and blah, blah, blah. No one knows the values or the mission, whatever, right? But Chad, sorry if there's a Chad on this call, but Chad is just doing whatever he wants, insulting people, bothering, like whatever it is, and is getting paid a lot of money. So when you identify that worst behavior tolerated and you're like, all right, leaders, are you willing to address it? It sets the tone right there of like, do they really care? Right. And the same thing with like, should this manager be a leader? Especially if you're changing over and this is an opportunity to get rid of certain managers and promote other people that are really good leaders. This is your opportunity. So I feel like that is worth it. From a more positive approach, it's kind of the one that I emphasized where it's just like, if I had more time, we would have done this. Usually I break out into groups and I'm like, hey, okay, what everyone identify your language of appreciation. So then we all identify. And then I'm like, what are you going to tell your supervisor? When we're done here, you're like, I like acts of service. Okay, what are you going to ask of your supervisor after this? Okay, because I like acts of service. Can you? My family really wants to go on a vacation. We haven't gone on a vacation in 2 years. Could you just help me out here, right? And figure out a way in which so we could do this, right? That's an act of service, right? So tangibly getting them to communicate how they want to be appreciated is a really big step. Um, and then the leaders that are going to be good, because the leaders that are going to be good will actually do that.
Yeah, I love that. Those are both two really powerful tools. I've never thought about asking flat out that question of like, what things are you willing to tolerate? And then two, that, we all talk about our love languages, but you often forget that that translates to your work life too. So
Yeah.
inviting that kind of conversation into the space, that's really powerful. Thank you for sharing.
And I will say the last thing regarding love languages, right? So there are 5 love languages. But notice I only had 4 for languages of appreciation because touch, that's not in the workplace. Maybe a high five, but other than that,
HR would be really pleased to
we're
hear you
good.
say that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
we'll
good.
just stick to
We're
4.
good. We're doing the 4. The 4 are good.
Any other thoughts or questions for Jeff?
Just Karen, again, don't want to monopolize, but this has been so wonderful for me because my history's been internal for a few years, and then I go out independent, and and then it's I'm up there and in age, and I still therapy journaling. Why did they were all when I was internal, well, in companies. And you've helped me because that was really bad behavior being tolerated where I felt bullied. I didn't feel heard, and it drove me out of there. I quit several places because it was such a bad environment.
Yeah.
Now I don't know how am I ever going to get over this at my age. You've helped me shift it, that there's a place to use this and help others. So thank you.
And I'm glad you brought that up because I kind of skipped over this part, but it's like, oh, where did I share my screen here regarding it? But there's in my opinion, there really right now is like a culture war when it comes to where work is going to go, right? Like you have old school leadership that's like individualism, competition, control, and ego. That's the Elon Musks. That's the Mark Zuckerbergs. It used to be Steve Jobs, where it's like deifying my way or the highway stuff, right? And then there's human-centered leadership built off of humanity, collaboration, inspiration, and following your intuition. It's been much, if we're genderizing it a little bit, it's been skewed much more to like toxic masculine leadership. And we really need to embrace healthy masculine and healthy feminine leadership, right? Much more compassion. Play is it's a feminine leadership trait because it's very much about collaboration and following your intuition. So whatever role you can play, I mean, I talk about your industry of change management and HR as probably some of the most pivotal people that are going to decide the future of work. And there's going to be such a propaganda to go back to like the way it should be before pandemic. And whatever you can do to really challenge leaders to be like, is this right? Like, is this the right way to teach? Is this the right way to treat people? Even if you're transitioning and a lot of these positions are going to be replaced by AI in the next 10 years, how are we even letting people know that we're transitioning out of some of those roles? How are we doing that in a way that is just human? And if you can do that, you'll have such huge ripple effects in the industry, and you'll probably be more successful because people will want to work with you.
I think that's an amazing note to end on. So just want to say thank you to Jeff again for your time, your insights. Oh, fireworks too. If you haven't already, make sure you scan the QR code to get your bonus gift. And thank you so much. We'll be sharing the recording afterwards. And everyone, have a wonderful evening. Can't wait to see you at our next event.
See ya, everybody. Thanks so much.